Clarity. For myself, in my experience, it's not good to be too much in a hurry because you might save an hour, a day, a week, a month, even a year, but it might set you back more because you're going in a direction that is ultimately, you decide later on, not where you want to be. So obviously we're all going to have to self-correct and do iterations. Like in business, they say fail fast and lean startup principles. And the same thing applies to life, because until we get to a destination, we don't know exactly not only where we are and how we got there, but what it feels like to be there, especially versus the alternatives. So I find that reflection is very helpful because, things happen over time. It's like if you're not really thinking about things and self-aware, Warren Buffett spends most of his days just thinking and reading, and he's done okay for himself, and he not only, financially, but he seems pretty happy, and he had a good marriage and everything. So I think there's a famous expression in baseball. I heard Tim McCarver, but someone else might have, I think Tim McCarver said it, but someone else might have said it originally, which is, let the game come to you. He was talking about baseball, but life is the same thing. Like right now I'm watching a cat. I'm outdoors, and the cat is kind of like in its own world, which is kind of I think it's chasing maybe like a mouse or something, because it's chasing something. But that's kind of true for all of us. We all have our own little drama. I mean, some people are more melodramatic than others, but we're all the center of our own stories. At least we should be. Bob Proctor says that sometimes, unfortunately, we play the extra in our own movie, and I find kind of that idea that when you crest one hill, then you find another hill. I'm finding I'm at a point now. It's been a difficult time. I was telling someone, which is definitely the case, that the last 2 or 3 months of my life I think has been harder, but I don't want to say harder. I'm reframing it, rethinking it. I would say more transformative, because the person I am at this very moment, I think, is, in my mind, I mean, other people can have their own opinion, but much different in a 2 or 3 month span than is normally the case. I mean, I think the amount of change I've gone through in 2 months in terms of my mental thinking apparatus and attitudes is normally what I would do maybe in 2 to 5 years. 2 months to 2 to 5 years. Like they say, sometimes, a year happens in a week. Sometimes a week happens in a year. It's like that expression, which is a little bit different in meaning, but some people are living their life for 20 years, and other people perhaps, not in a value judgment way, but are living 1 year 20 times. I talked about that in other podcasts, but what I'm thinking now is coming into my mind is that, if someone has cancer, or if they only have a short time to live, they are very, I think most of the time, eventually kind of present focused. Because if you don't have a lot of days left, and you're not going to worry about 20, 50 years. I feel like, God willing, I have a lot of good years left, and I really think the best years are ahead of me, but, nobody is promised tomorrow even. So that's why we have to, make the most of today. But I just feel more of a sense of clarity. That's why I'm kind of breaking up a little bit, just because it's fun and exciting to be clear. I've always striven, if that's a word, to have clarity, but I think it's more important to me now, and I'm spending, more time trying to be clear. It's not even so much a trying, it's kind of more like an allowing or a waiting, and enjoying the moment. And when you enjoy the moment, a lot of things happen. I was sitting outside today, and I saw some other people from this area that I know, and you realize that everybody has their own story. Just talking with one or two people, it's kind of I kind of got reacquainted to what some of their story is, and I realized that if I didn't sit out, I wouldn't have, by chance or happenstance or destiny or whatever it is. I don't think things are usually happenstance, but I don't know for sure. But I don't know anything for sure. None of us really do, we pretend we do. But Oprah has a Colin, what I know for sure, certain things I think are kind of like maybe, archetypes or patterns in our soul that we do kind of like, I think, know things, either through many lifetimes or... The other thing I wanted to say in this clarity thing is that I was impressed by a recent video of Aaron Doherty. I had seen like his thumbnails a few times and it didn't really impress me, but I listened to one of his videos and it was powerful to me. Have you ever like glanced over something for a while? I mean, maybe he's like more at a point of where I'm at now, but I only watched one of his videos. I watched like half of another one. Like, I think some of them are more appealing to me than others, but he said kind of like what he said directly and what he kind of said between the lines kind of appealed to me. And in my mind, even though he didn't use the word clarity, I'm applying it a little bit off center towards clarity, which is that his life kind of changed. I'm kind of paraphrasing or maybe like inserting a little bit, but this is my take on it. That and you can tell these podcasts, I always try to be, accurate, not to like be like obsessive compulsive about it, because some people are like, there's a fine line between discipline and obsessive compulsive. I think the discipline is the master skill that makes all the skills possible. That's what I heard, and I believe it. It's attention to the little details without losing the big picture. It's that paradoxical, like being comfortable with ambiguity, when you can like really be focused not on minutia. There's a difference between details and minutia. Details are things that you have to get right. In my mind, I mean, that might not be the dictionary definition, but you have to get them right. Otherwise, your life is not going to go well in terms of however you just define it personally. But minutia is things that is just like busy work. Like I was watching a podcast from, I hope I can remember his name. He's from the London School of Economics, and he was talking about like workplace complexity and how to like manage yourself and other people, I guess, in accelerated times that we face today. It was actually a 2015 video, I think, but it seemed like 2021 because it's like, it didn't seem like there was a time gap there. It was probably like more like future thinking, or at least like timeless principles maybe. But he was saying that there's a big difference between being busy and getting things done. Like there's a famous expression that says never mistake activity for progress. You can run a marathon on the roads, or you can run a marathon on a treadmill. If you run a marathon on the roads, then you've covered, some are point to point, some are not, but you've covered, probably 26 miles and 385 yards. That's what a marathon is. I've done a couple of them. And if memory serves, that's the distance. But if you run on a treadmill 26 miles and 385 yards, you're exactly in the same spot, maybe a few inches different than where you started. So a lot of people, like, this was kind of like my takeaway from his thing. Like, oh yeah, I had a really productive day. I had 6 meetings, and I had 8 emails, or 80 emails, or 20 emails. But I mean, meetings and emails and pushing, what some people call pushing paper, that doesn't mean that you actually accomplished anything. I mean, sometimes those are actually time wasters. Sometimes, you wasted not only your own time, but other people's time. Like I've talked about Elon Musk and his views and meetings and things like that. Richard Jolly, I think that's his name, if I'm remembering correctly. And he said that some companies like have things on the wall that there's like an app that he said that he likes that it takes like the square root of 7. No, it takes the salary of each person. I guess you input it in, and then multiplies it or whatever by the amount of time each person's in the meeting, and it could be like an astronomical figure. I mean, people don't realize how much time they're spending just and even emails. Like if you went through an email chain and you took the salaries of all the people that responded to the email. I mean, I know it's not only email, there's Slack and a lot of other productivity things, but don't mistake activity for progress. That was his main point. He had a few other very interesting takeaways as well. He's a smart guy, but I think in my life I have to be cognizant of that. Like time is the one thing you can't really replace. In a way, you can kind of replace it because you can do automation, which gives you back time. You could do. It doesn't really give you back time because you're still the same chronological age. But longevity, for example, will give you back time. Like if your body's physically younger, or if you can live more years. employees can give you back time because it's not only your efforts, but it's like, 1,000 other people. Skills can give you back time because you make more money, and money can, you can hire people to do things for you. So getting back to the parentheticals, why I try to be pretty precise in these podcasts, I think the most intelligent people I've met, and there's many different aspects of intelligence, there's musical intelligence, cognitive intelligence, emotional intelligence, and social intelligence. But I'm talking about intelligence now in the sense of actually being successful in terms of reaching your goals and in the eyes of the world. And again, Darwin said that, it's not the strong that survive. It's not even the intelligent, it's the adaptable. So I think adaptation, flexibility, adaptability is perhaps one of the most important, if not the most important. You can't really rank them, forms of intelligence. But I think that the precision, that's what I'm talking about. Precision, preciseness. There's some people that are called wordsmiths. Their words are like poetry. Some people are obsessive compulsive about it, and it's they spend half an hour deciding whether to have a comma or not. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking a precise mind. You can tell when a person gives directions. Some people just say, go 20 miles and turn left. I mean, that's not, perhaps a bad direction depending on the context. But some people more it's easier to follow without being minutia. And, people that are very precise, but you can be precise about the wrong things, because the corporate ladder or climbing a hill, you could get to the top of the hill or the top of the corporate ladder and then realize that your ladder was attached to the wrong building. So to me, it's kind of like a two-step process. The first is that you have to be very precise and strategic in thinking and allowing is a big part of it, so that you can actually maximize, even more than efficiency, just outcomes. So you don't mistake activity for progress. But the second thing is, so first you have to define what the goal is. And that takes a period of time of reflection, I think, because it's a moving target, because we always have different goals and objectives. So if you're clear and if you're very self-aware, like Gary Vaynerchuk, he's very successful. He always talks about self-awareness, and I think he has a lot of it, as demonstrated by his success and also how he operates. Then you can pivot easily. Because you notice different things. I also saw another video. It was by the Stanford School of Business, and they said that entrepreneurs and I'm not sure if it's just entrepreneurs or successful people, but famously, this was not in the video, but entrepreneurs are more geared towards dealing with ambiguity, because when you have a job, it's not clearly cut and dried, but you can be an intrapreneur even if you're not an entrepreneur. But it's kind of they tell you what to do a lot more because they're paying you. When you're an entrepreneur, you still have your clients that have expectations, but you're kind of more deciding on your own, what markets to go into, what clients to have. So it's more self-directed. You don't have someone writing you a paycheck, and you can fire your clients if you don't like them. Most people, they can change jobs, but people in jobs have more security, but you trade security for freedom or flexibility, whichever one you want to think of it. So in terms of the precision factor in the podcast, in terms of I do a lot of parentheticals, not parentheticals, that's not the precise term actually. It's more when you go sideways, not tangents, but kind of I forget the word that I'm looking for, but it's kind of you kind of explain yourself, you make a comment, then you explain it. And then it goes off in a different direction. I think I've always looked down on myself a little bit, and I don't like to do that and think that that's kind of a bad thing. But I think it's actually served me, because it's kind of this wasn't the one I was looking for, but it's kind of nuance. It's kind of life is a lot nuanced, because what works for you in one situation is not going to necessarily work for you in the next situation. So to come back, half or full circle to Aaron Doherty, one thing I took away from him is that he does podcasts at length, usually 20, 30 minutes. And my podcasts are usually 2-3 minutes. I don't think one is better than the other, because Naval does 1 or 2 minute podcasts. I think some people gravitate one. But Aaron Doherty, he kind of trusts himself, I think, in a stream of consciousness. He doesn't look like he's looking at any notes. It seems like he just has a general idea in his head. And that's kind of like the way I am, too. Like, I have an idea of what I want to say, and then it just kind of evolves. I think my style is a little bit similar to Aaron Doherty in that way, and some other people. But I think that, the short form writing and the long form writing, like Joe Rogan does 3-hour podcasts, and Lex Friedman does 3-hour podcasts, I think. I'm starting to feel more comfortable and more inclined towards doing, like, at least occasionally, I'm not saying all the time, because I also feel an inclination to do short ones, which has been my tendency. But, like, this one is now 15 minutes and a half almost. And I feel like it takes more effort, and I feel like maybe it's taking me away from other things that I want to do also. But I feel that maybe I can give more value both to myself and other people. Because when you do a podcast, they say that the person that learns the most in the classroom is a teacher. And to me, kind of like doing podcasts is kind of like being a teacher, because it's kind of, I'm thinking, they say, like, if you want to learn something, teach it. And that's what I feel like podcasting is. Like, I started this, I had a kernel in my mind and a couple of things that went with it. Sometimes I actually jot down a few notes, but very rarely. Like, if there's like 6 things that I want to say, I don't mind if I forget 5 of them, if I get one. But if I feel like all 6 are important, then I might write down like 3 or 4 of them, perhaps, to make sure that I at least cover some of the bases. But I'm starting to feel a little bit more inclination towards doing a little bit longer podcasts, because I think, Teal Swan also does longer podcasts, although she's starting to do like snippets also. Because I believe also in micro content, like people have short attention spans, and sometimes if it's really laser focused, you can break a long podcast down to short. I think Gary Vaynerchuk does that also. So, sometimes less is more. Like, I'm getting more done, but I'm actually doing less. But it's only because I have like the foundation. Like I think, like Scott Galloway says, the famous NYU professor, that you have to work like 12, 15, 8 hour days. He used to sleep in his job, I think, for like decades, in order to have the luxury. Like, now he's probably around my age, like in his 50s, or maybe he's a little bit older or younger, I don't know. But and I agree with that. Like, I put in a foundation of like being focused on activity, but like they say, what got you here is not going to get you there. So what got me here to where I am now is a lot kind of like activity. But now that I have a certain level, of accomplishment, what gets me to the next level, I think, is not what got me to this level. I think just activity is kind of like limiting me if I'm over-focused on activity. There's some people that really, they spend almost their whole life thinking. Like, I know a few people that are kind of successful. So I think the world is moving a little bit more, like, with all the stuff going on in NFTs and everything else. We're having supply issues in manufacturing. I saw a video yesterday. It was actually down for the first time in a long time, like under 50%. They call it like contracting instead of expanding. It's like we're less reliant on physical things. Like, we need physical things because you have to have some place to live. You can't live on the internet. Although, it seems like some people do. But, and you can't eat your Twitter account, although some people get eaten alive by it. But, aside from the basic necessities, which most people have, I feel bad. Obviously, some people have, even basic needs not too well met. But there's a lot of prosperity. Like they say, the average person today is better off, or probably equal, or probably better off, actually, I'm not sure which, but than, the aristocracy of like hundreds of years ago. Like, if you were a king, I'm laughing because this is what I'm about to say next. If you were a king, maybe like, say you were one of the kings of France or whatever, and I don't know exactly what period it is, but maybe 300, 400, 500 years ago. Again, I don't know the exact time. I have some history, but I'm not a French history. I don't know the exact dates. But say you were a French king, and you had more money, more wealth than, because I think in the aristocracy, almost by definition, wealth was very concentrated. But you couldn't fly in an airplane. Like if you transplanted the king from France of hundreds of years ago into today, and they saw the airplanes, it would be like, I don't know what they would think, either like witchcraft or magic, or they would think they were dreaming or something, So The idea is, and I feel like I want to kind of bring this to close, I try to like tie the pieces together if I can, but I think people are smart enough to draw their own conclusions and tie things together. The main thing I want to say in this podcast, and I think I've said it, but a little bit to tie it together, is that clarity is a moment-to-moment thing, but it's also something that evolves over time. Like the clarity that I have today is hopefully less than the clarity I'll have tomorrow. It's not even more or less, but it's different at least. But it's built upon, like your relationships are built upon like how you interact with your spouse today, or your brother or your sister or your mom or your friend, is because you have a series of interactions with them over time, a history, a shared history, although each person, probably perceives it differently, somewhat. So, clarity is something that's in the moment in terms of like allowing and where you're at mentally to be able to process it. Like the last 2 months have been so transformative to me that I think I'm in a more receptive state towards clarity, at this exact moment, mindfulness and things like that. But it's a moment-to-moment thing, but it's an evolving thing.